Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 400. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You Know.
How's it going, eh?
We were thinking to ourselves, we'll get them all in one episode, we'll do something more compressed. And as we started having the discussion, which is, it's one of the things I really do like about recording with you and kind of the way we do things, we let the discussion decide on the length. We don't force it to fit into a time frame. So it begins and ends when it's supposed to. When we were talking with Art, both Art and I were running the movies silent along with our conversation, just in case there was anything that would cue us, something that we wanted to talk about visually that was going on in the film. Well, what happened was, as is typical when we have these discussions and we have the best laid plans, we were thinking like we'd do an hour for each movie. We didn't. We did like a start to finish commentary. While we're not 100% chronological with the film, because we were talking about it while the film was on, we started realizing there might be some people that want to plop on each of these movies and kind of watch along with the discussion and just kind of reminisce about the films that way. Other people might want to listen in their cars, and it works that way too. So we tried to make an episode that's flexible to the needs of the people that want to listen to this. We wound up doing recordings for Superman 4, because we went chronological, and then we did a recording for Batman and Robin in the same sitting. We were sitting and having these discussions for 5 hours. Now, the episodes go to being a little over 2 hours each, by the time we're all done. When we got to the end of that phase, we realized that if we did Catwoman, we'd all be dead to the world. And it wouldn't make for a good episode. So we decided to save Catwoman for the end of August. We're going to come back. Art's going to join us again, and we're going to do the Catwoman one. So we're still doing it. We just decided to spread that out a little bit because of the amount of content we already had. Woo, what a fun recording this was. I can't wait to... So this one's going to be Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the DCinfinite.com podcast partnership. I want to do our ad a little different on this episode, just because, we're in 400 shows. DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com, they're part of the same company. They have been great supporters of the podcast through most of our 400 episodes, actually. We've been lucky that we've had sponsorship through almost the entirety of Raging Bullets, but nobody has been a bigger supporter of our show than DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. For those of you that aren't podcasts, if you don't know, podcasts themselves, in most cases, do not generate money. They cost a lot each month. There's regular expenses associated with them, including time, but also hosting the files, hosting websites, equipment. So it's really great when you have a company like DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com that not only supports us, but supports so many other podcasts. If you haven't checked out the sites, please do, because they are big sponsors of podcasts. If you do your digital shopping through My Digital Comics or Comixology, please do your shopping through their portal. You can get the links right from our website. It supports them, which in turn supports our show. So thank you very much for giving them a chance, checking them out, and seeing what their websites can do for you. They've been wonderful supporters of our show. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets, episode 400. Raging Bullets. That's right, volunteers. For this special episode of Raging Bullets, we will be discussing the cinema masterpieces Superman 4, Quest for Peace, and Batman and Robin. Naturally, we wouldn't want to ruin your experience with these critically acclaimed works of art. So if you haven't watched the movies, please do so before watching our show. This way we can all enjoy the show.
One special note, at the end of this episode, we're going to be debuting our new closing theme song, put together by longtime friend of the show, Eli. So be sure to listen at the end of this episode for that special treat. And without further ado, let's talk Superman 4 with longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
400 episodes, and we are joined by someone I really there's been a guest who we've been very lucky with the friendships we've made on this show over the years. And Art Lyon, having you back on the show for this episode is so appropriate because we've done so many great episodes on your work. We've also done so many great episodes talking about things like Smallville. I mean, we've done media episodes together. So it was great to have the opportunity to have you back on the show to kind of revisit one of our old stables talking about media.
Yay!
I feel like, first of all, I should welcome you back, but I should also apologize because now, after watching these films, I feel like we punished you.
You know, I have been, for some reason, I have been in the mood. I've really been enjoying cheesy, bad stuff lately. Like the past half year or year, the majority of comic books I've been reading is like stuff from like the 70s. I'm kind of rereading through comics I read when I was really young, and it's really interesting because they're pretty cheesy. Mm-hmm. and I think that maybe that's what started it. I've been enjoying stuff that's not like great stuff, but is great in its own way. You know what I mean?
When I came up with this idea, I was thinking along those lines. I'm like, what haven't we really done on the show? Because I wanted this to feel very different than something we've done previously. I'm like, we haven't really deliberately tackled something that was cheesy in a long time for this purpose, and certainly never with this kind of scale with regards to film. This just felt right.
Yeah. We talked about Man of Steel. Right, we did that episode.
Mm-hmm.
But, besides that.
These really are three films out of if you look at DC's archive of movies, these are ones that pretty universally are lauded as in this category.
These are the bad ones.
So you guys keep saying cheesy, but in reality, you're saying beep.
Well, as we talk about these, I was struck actually by how these movies are not all that bad, really. They have big problems, but I find them watchable, despite their serious flaws.
Well, why don't we, you know what, you're heading us down that path. Let's go with that. On three movies, watching these three films, guys, what were your overall impressions? And Art, if there's anything else you want to say, please go with that, because I like that idea. Let's talk about that, and then we'll jump into each film.
Well, I found myself thinking about and kind of focusing on the strengths of each of these movies and the stuff in them that really works. Like which actors understand what kind of movie they're in and which actors don't. Because when you're making these kind of overtly cheesy movies like Batman and Robin, and to a lesser degree Catwoman, you have to play that a certain way, And it's interesting to see what the different actors contribute, and also like look at how the director is handling it, looking at the different aspects of the production. There's acting, there's directing, there's the script, there's the story, there's the art direction, the designs and the production design. I find myself looking at that kind of stuff, and from a production standpoint, Batman and Robin is pretty impressive. There is like a lot of design going on there. It's crazy, but there's a lot going on there. I mean, and in Catwoman too. I've always been really interested in how movies are made. As a kid, I had a subscription to like Starlog, and magazines like that about old movies and how movies are made. Magazines like Cinefantastique. I don't know if you remember that one. Starlog, Famous Monsters of Filmland. The Ackerman magazines. And there were a couple others. I was just always interested in that. I don't know why. And so I tried to stay up to speed on that kind of thing. I like reading about the making of movies. And so I as a result, I guess, I know a lot of what goes into making a movie. And I've studied a little bit the book to film adaptation process. And so I think that's given me maybe some insights into how you take a comic book or a comic book character and make it into a movie.
I almost feel like I should be asking you the reverse question then.
Okay.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because, I mean, I guess in the sense that it's your... no, I mean, just thinking of you talking about that, it almost sounds like you had such a rich history in like looking at film from that perspective, and maybe it fed your art.
That's probably true. I mean, I've always been kind of an analyzer, and it's a problem sometimes, because sometimes I'm kind of notorious for overthinking things. But yeah, I just like sort of trying, to look at something and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and why it works and why it doesn't work, which is is why in the comic book reviews I've written in the past year or so, I try to focus on that rather than on what I like and I don't like. I try to focus on what works and what doesn't work, and then try to figure out why it works or why it doesn't.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's more interesting. If you want to read opinions online, there's plenty of that.
Yeah.
I would rather do something constructive if I can.
I like that too. To me, it's far more interesting to read. I think it informs. I find that when I read reviews that are like that, and you're right, they're few and far between, but there's certain blogs I follow, certain reviews I follow, and certainly yours are one of them. And the reason why is because I like things that help me grow as a reader, that give me more value. So if somebody's got a perspective where they're kind of deconstructing it in a unique way, whether I 100% agree or disagree is irrelevant. It's what the content has done to enrich my experience that I really like. So that's something I really appreciate about your approach to reviews.
Oh, good. Well, thanks. Yeah, I had this really great art teacher once who one of the big things that he focused on in our class was this concept of art criticism. After we would work on a project, everybody would have their stuff up on the wall and we would talk about it. And he really emphasized this idea in art criticism. Phrases like I like or I don't like really have no place. If you're going to do strict or actual art criticism, it's not about what you like. It's about understanding the media, understand how things are done in that media, and trying to figure out what the artist intended, how they went about doing it, if it succeeded, those kinds of things. That requires you have to understand that media or that medium, which requires work. You have to research, you have to experiment, you have to have, you have to have some kind of basis of understanding it rather than just as a casual observer or as a casual audience member.
So this is what I was hoping for with this episode, that we'd start having that kind of, there's going to be 3 different people here, and we're going to each have a different hat that we're wearing as far as how we approach these films. But I think what's going to be great is just that we all really kind of approached it with our own unique lens, and I think we're going to have an interesting discussion about these films that probably has never been had before with these particular movies, because boy, they're butchered.
I'm playing Superman 4 in the background here now, just to refresh my memory. It's the one I didn't watch recently. I've seen it often enough that I just need a little refresher here.
What we'll do as well at the end of the show, for anybody listening, I always put links for any of our guests to their websites and their content. So any of Art's links will be at the end of the episode. So anybody listening right now, if you want to jump into Art's reviews and all that, please check into our show notes at the end. And we'll review it again at the end of the episode just to make sure that everyone knows where to find everything. Jim, what were just kind of an overview of your experience watching these 3 movies before we jump into Superman 4? What was kind of do you have kind of an overall experience of what this was like for you?
I think Clubber Lane put it best. Pain. Man, Sean and I just recently had dinner, and I told you at dinner, and I'm going to share on the show right now, I almost called Sean's house and almost left the following message. I just called to say I hate you.
Diddy.
I didn't want to leave it, though, because in fear his wife, Mariah, actually would hear the message, and I wouldn't want her to get the wrong message. But, yeah, I really do hate you, Sean. I just so we know, flat out, I hate you, and I will get even.
See, I thought I was going to hate me from this experience, too, but I think I'm a little bit closer to Art on this one, because there's something inherently wrong for each of the 3 movies. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to be the same for the 3 of us where we find the things that we consider broken. I was surprised, though, particularly, and we'll jump into Superman 4, and actually probably this is a good segue to jump into Superman 4. I was surprised at how much I liked this movie. And it's kind of the thing that happened with all 3 of them. There's things that are really broken in all 3. And I know exactly what it is for Superman 4, and I'll hit it when I get there. But it's funny, I'll honestly say right now, the film, for about the first 40 minutes or so in at least, I was having a good old time. I really was. I was really liking the movie. Then something happens, and we'll talk about it. And there's still parts that I feel that same way that I felt about in the beginning of the movie. But I'll just say it's Nuclear Man. Nuclear Man broke it for me.
Nuclear Man breaks everything.
Nuclear, he did. He crushed this movie for me. Because there's no sense why hide the fact. That's the point of talking about this.
We all knew what was coming.
Yeah,
I think we all have that same mindset.
It's Nuclear Man. Other than that, I can honestly say there was so much of this film that I was surprised. Because I would say out of the 3 films that we're reviewing, and I'm a Batman guy, this was probably my favorite out of the 3. Just because of, there's that Christopher Reeve, Superman-loving guy that got so much enjoyment out of the content that I really dug from this, that I really felt sad at the parts where this film was broken, because the parts that were good were so good.
Yeah, it's funny. I just heard an interview that Ron and Fez did with John Cryer about his current stuff with Three and a Half Men, or however, I think that whatever his show is, and they're talking to him, and they mentioned
Two and a Half Men.
2.5 Men, that's it. They talked a little bit about Superman 4 because he's Lenny in the movie, and he had a couple funny lines where he was talking. He said, when the premiere came out, he was all excited because he's this young, fresh-faced kid in Hollywood, and he's talking to Christopher Reeves, and Christopher Reeves is like, yeah, man, it's just really bad. It looks like it sounds like they cut the budget on some of the special effects and the flying. Yeah. They had to reuse a bunch of flying sequences. They had to hack and chop. There's a lot of just pieces that were cut out of this movie that just, Christopher Reeves was not very proud of this piece of work.
No, it was his idea. I think the overall storyline, the concept was his idea. I think, or like he worked with the screenwriter.
The story credit actually goes to. It's funny that you say that, Art. It goes to Christopher Reeve, Lawrence Connor, and Mark Rosenthal for the story.
Okay, and
then Connor and Rosenthal get credit for the screenplay.
Right, the screenplay. Yeah. Okay. It's a laudable concept, but it kind of reminds me of one of the problems with, not to go off on a tangent, but Star Trek 5, where they go to find God.
Yeah.
It's too big a concept, kind of, and it's a kind of thing that Star Trek has done a bunch, and it's too obvious, it's too direct, because usually in Star Trek they would approach this concept of God really indirectly. It's an alien, or it's a computer, or it's a child, or And Star Trek 5, they really take it a little too literally, or take too straight attack on it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a problem in this movie. I think it's a neat concept, but it's a little too obvious and too direct. I think it might have been more interesting if they had dealt with the issue more indirectly, I think.
The concept seemed to overtake the villain and even overtake the story, because there were some great ideas that were put out here, and we'll talk about it as we get to those portions of the film. I'm with you, because I think the concept's interesting. I think that the idea behind it's good, but when it overtakes your film to the point where it gets in the way of story, there's an inherent problem, and that's what happened here. So I think it stole some great moments. Jim, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that even though I'm saying I hate you, Sean, and I do, by the way, but there were some good moments in this movie. And I think the overall plot and storyline behind it, there's some really cool stuff. It just within some of the parts of the execution is where they ran into their little issues. And I really do think there was a lot of stuff that got chopped out that shouldn't have gotten chopped out. And part of me wants to, I thought I saw digitally remastered with additional footage, and part of me wants to actually seek that out just to see if there's extra stuff that would make the story better. But in a way, I'm afraid to.
That stuff's always interesting to explore. I love watching, the deleted scenes and comparing a theatrical cut to a longer cut, just to kind of see how it changes the pace of the movie overall. And a lot of times that stuff is removed because it does slow down the movie and messes up the pacing. But in a movie like this that already has pretty significant pacing problems, then maybe why not just have it in there?
Yeah, and maybe some of those will cause payoffs or lead to payoffs. There's some choices where they cut down due to time. They want to stay under a certain time window, and they cut things out that are sometimes pivotal scenes to understanding motivations. Although on this film, I don't know that there's not a confusion for me in anything that's happening here or why they're doing anything. I'm pretty clear on all that.
Right.
It really gets to an issue of execution, and that's where I think we run into some problems. And I think John Cryer, I'm glad Jimmy brought some of that up because I didn't know that was the case. When John Cryer was talking about the fact that there were some budget cuts and things, there are some significant parts where it's really clear that there should be some extra sequences. Yeah. Let's go ahead and start talking about the film. Let's just talk about some of the early parts, and then I think we're going to jump to back to some of these things, like kind of organically.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
Well, let's talk about John Cryer, because he's one of my least favorite things in this movie. He's just so unnecessary. He's there purely so they can stick in some more gags, and I guess they wanted to fill more screen time with, I guess, a hot young actor and put more jokes in there, but they're bad jokes, and he's just really unnecessary.
He's a trendy Otis. And that's a big problem because Otis was just fine. The whole point of Otis was really to be something for Lex Luthor to play off of. And Gene Hackman does that well, and I loved really Gene Hackman in this. I just didn't. Lenny, you said it best. Unnecessary.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
I love
Super Dude.
God, it's just the whole movie. I just want to remove him. Can we remove him somehow? Like, can we airbrush him out? Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor and Christopher Reeve as Superman, I think, is one of the great actor and character combinations in movie history. I think those two actors in those two roles, they contrast and complement each other tremendously, I think.
There's a chemistry there, and the parts that I liked about this film really are about chemistry. There was so many sequences in this film where there was great chemistry. Lenny, it's funny, I would totally remove Lenny from the film in an instant. He wasn't as big of a problem for me as Nuclear Man, and we'll talk more about that specifically. But
Nuclear Man is just cheesy.
Besides Gene Hackman and Christopher Reeve, it was great to see Christopher Reeve with Margot Kidder. They had some brilliant moments together that I thought were really great. And Mariel Hemingway, I thought, as the editor-to-be, she had a great redemption story arc that went on in this that I really quite enjoyed. I liked seeing her with Clark. I liked that she was like this rich girl that kind of had never been in this position before, where she got a chance to step out from Dad's shadow and kind of really think things through for herself. She was coming of age. And I liked that Clark's influence in that relationship and seeing him as kind of like, this is something odd for me to see this nice guy who is not motivated by things that the people I'm normally around are motivated by, actually helped her grow.
Well, and that, I think, is, for my money, the real strength of Christopher Reeve's portrayal of Clark Kent and Superman, and how he's written this way consistently in the movies, is that he is the counterpoint. He is in the first movie. The timing of the first movie is important in that it came out 1978, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is at the height of disco era, right? And it came out at this point where, in the United States at least, our culture was at this really weird point where we were questioning everything and kind of didn't know who we were. After the 60s and the 70s and the counterculture movement and Vietnam and Watergate and the assassinations and Nixon's resignation, the mid and late 70s were like this weird period where anything goes, kind of, and nobody knew what was right and wrong, kind of. And then in comes this great script and directing and this actor in this role playing Clark Kent and Superman, who is completely, unironically, a straight arrow. right? And it's an important movie, I think, in from a cultural standpoint, and he plays that character with such integrity. He plays him really genuinely, and he does it consistently without hiccups throughout all 4 movies. It's really pretty impressive.
You know, that first film, we were talking about special effects before, so visually stunning. It's the second one out of the 2, and it's funny. I think differently about them now after seeing the Richard Donner cut and knowing the whole story that they were meant to be. It's a 2-parter, knowing that the first one was really meant to feed into the second. So I attribute now my love for the second one, which is really my favorite film out of the batch, to how great the first one was at building to it. But the first film, and this is one thing that it does have over the second, there's some sequences in there that are just by today's standards, they still hold up as being gorgeous and mind-blowingly stunning on the screen. They hold up well on an HD television when you see, when you see it in a big scale. For a film that old to still have that kind of pop and flair and to hold up that's artistry. And to be able to pull that off and still have that stand says something for how great that film really was.
Well, the production values on that first movie are really high. I mean, they spent real money. They invested in a good director, a director who knew how to make a real movie as opposed to just a gimmick movie. It's a good movie. People talk about the unevenness in the tone of that movie and argue that it's like 3 movies kind of squished together. But it's just a really good movie. I guess people criticize the pacing and the comedy elements, with Otis, like we were talking about. But I think you need that stuff in there to offset the kind of straight arrow genuineness of Christopher Reeve's portrayal. I think you have to have those elements as well.
If that was 3 movies, it's a great 3 movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, now, opening sequence with this movie. I gotta tell you, this to me was a classic Superman moment.
Oh, yeah.
This your rescue on the Russian space station, even just the lead-up moments where they're singing and just, the little Russian banter, then the emergency, and out of nowhere, Superman does the save. But back when I saw this in the theaters, and even now when I rewatched this, I realized something. And it's one of those things that happen in a lot of superhero movies. But I especially started noticing at this time when I was watching through, is that they like to kind of redefine the laws of physics. Because how did the cosmonauts hear Superman speaking?
He has super speaking powers.
Wait a minute. If you're gonna argue with that, you might as well ask the question: how does Lacey breathe in space?
We're gonna get to that one.
Because that happens later with Nuclear Man.
That's right.
I've got a whole list of Superman redefines the laws of physics.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm fine with the whole opening sequence of events because with what they did later on, it's like you got to give them a pass for that early stuff because they were just dabbling then.
A relatively small offense. In the scope of later, one of the great things I came across this, I don't know where, but it has been argued that one of the things that people like about Superman is that he rescues people, whereas like a Batman, what we like about him is that he beats up bad guys. He stops bad guys. Superman rescues people, and he's really good at it because he's got crazy superpowers. And for me, a lot of my favorite Superman moments in the movies are when he's rescuing people. And it's great when they start with that because it kind of establishes what that character is about.
I think they did the same thing with the Kent farm right after this. Yeah. Where, he stops off at the farm. I loved that whole bit. And there was actually a part of it where I was going to be upset because of the fact that the farm was for sale. He goes into the barn later, opens it up. There he's pulling out the piece of the ship and doing that type of thing. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. The guy shows up, he puts the thing in, he puts the crystal in his pocket, and then the thing vanishes. This is, again, there's certain superpowers that Superman has in this that I'm wondering where they came from. He's got magic vanishing vision. He's got engineer vision. that like can which is a whole other problem. And then he's also got telekinesis, which I know was a sort of established in 2 when they were doing the whole finger thing. It's always been an inherent problem I have with I love this film series, I adore it, but if I'm going to be nitpicky, Superman doesn't have telekinesis. He doesn't need to have telekinesis. He can fly.
Yes.
Let him do that. But that goes, hearing that there's a budget issue, that goes back to those kind of things. Like, why are you doing that? The Kent Farm for me was a beautiful sequence, though. I don't mind, not that I don't mind, I love Clumsy Clark because they so broadcast the fact that he is establishing a persona who, in his actions, in the way that he talks, this film, I thought the strength of it was showcasing the behavior that was different with Superman, both in his verbal approach to people and his physical approach. It's very easy to see that the glasses aren't Superman's only mask in this film. And I thought this film handled that brilliantly.
Well, there's a great moment in the second movie where, is it second or in the first? Well, yeah, in both the first and the second movies, there's a moment in the first where he's thinking about telling Lois. And then, of course, in the second movie where Lois finds out. In those moments where Christopher Reeve is actively transitioning from one personality to the other, you can really see how much he does to change that.
See, I'm weird with the super dorky Clark because on one hand, I personally don't like it. I kind of prefer later incarnations where he's a little bit cooler and it's more of he's a loner to keep people at bay, and it's still not the same glasses. But then on the other hand, there are times when I do get that nostalgia for what is just the classic portrayal. Like Christopher Reeve's dorky portrayal, I do enjoy. But as it's a tough for me to say I don't like it because he did it so well. So I compliment the physical acting, but just like me, personal choice, I would prefer the non-super dorky Clark. And I wonder how he could have, because I think he would have also pulled off that one as well because he is a talented actor. So it's, I commend the acting, the physical acting skills he portrayed in doing it, but I just personally don't like that persona.
See, and one area where I'll disagree with that is one of the issues is, and one of the things I think Christopher Reeve did so well with this, and it's where I'll actually make an argument with you on this. It wasn't just that he was playing the dorky character. He was the dorky character with a code of ethics and a way of carrying himself that he was almost a person from a different time. And people who encounter him recognize that immediately. It's why Lacey was attracted to him. She was drawn to the fact that he's an anomaly. I mean, this is not a guy, she asks Lois right away, is he for real? And Lois has to come back with, yes, and I like him that way. And there's a point to that because that wasn't the dorky behavior. It was the way that he walked up to her and took a brave stand, but it wasn't like normally when a person's going to do that and they've got, their buns all ready to go up and, really kind of lay it out on the boss, they're going to say something that they would regret. And also something that's probably going to cause problems for their coworkers because, where everyone's going to be like, oh, great, you took a stand. Now look, we're all going to be punished because of this. Instead, he handled himself with a certain level of integrity, presented himself in a way that's uniquely Clark Kent. It isn't the way Superman would have approached it because we saw Superman's speeches in this film multiple times. But Clark does the same sort of thing where he stands up and presents a position, but he does it in a way that's uniquely Clark. And that's where Reeve, I think, succeeded, because if it had just been the comedy slapstick moments, I would agree with you there. But it's that put together with the fact that he still is the Kansas farm boy in those sequences. He does it when he's on the farm talking to the realtor. He's trying to teach the realtor a lesson about where he sees things, what he wants from his farm, and why he wants it. He actually lays it out for him and just says, I don't want a private business coming in here. I want this to remain a farm, and I want somebody here who's going to come in here and keep it a farm. So he does that in the midst of all that, and that's where it works for me.
It's interesting how the way that Christopher Reeve plays both of those roles in their own way. Each of those two aspects of that character, they stand out amongst everyone else around them. They stand out in, for the most part, very different ways, and yet in one respect, they stand out for the same reason, and that is, there's like a certain kind of bravery or like a courage even in Clark, in that usually person who's that nerdy or dorky or nebbish type character would not have much courage, right? And yet he can't stand by because of who he is, and so he stands out in that way as Clark and stands out in other ways as Superman.
Yeah, he still has the strength of character that Superman has, but without the dun bravado presentation of it.
Right.
But he's still that same person. Yeah.
Right. He has to figure out like how to do it, but not get noticed doing it, really.
There's also the third role that often gets ignored, and Reeve played this very well. It's the part of Superman that's the human in between. And they did this in the film with both aspects of the character. Clark, after the realtor's gone, takes the bat, throws the ball up, hits it out of the park. Superman, when he's faced with having to put Lois back in again, recognizing that it's not fair that I have to give her up. I can't put someone above because of my role as Superman. Yet there's that integrity in him that realizes that's his responsibility. He has to do it.
Right.
In the gym, when he's doing the aerobics with Lacey, and she's gone, and he kind of takes the barbell and tosses it to the guy. It's those moments where he slips a little bit. He doesn't do anything horrible or anything like that. He just slips a little bit. You see that both personas are a struggle for him. It's the third part of it that often gets ignored in Reed's portrayal. He's done this in the other films too, but I thought in this film it really stood out very well, and I think there's a brilliance to that.
Yeah. It's at this point he's played the character a bunch of times, and he's really comfortable in the role, and that probably gave him more room to play around with it.
One thing I wondered from that whole abandoned with the farm sequence and all that stuff. Why did Clark decide for all these years to leave this last piece of Krypton, this super powerful crystal, in a unlocked barn on an abandoned farm in Kansas and not keep it secured in the Fortress of Solitude this whole time?
Probably because he had a hard time letting go of home. Because even with the fact that he wants to keep it, it's funny that you say that. And this is stuff that's not expressly written in the film. So this is you're asking a brilliant question, by the way. So thinking that through, there's that part of yourself. When I had to leave my dad's house and move into an apartment with my wife, thrilled, excited to go ahead and do that. But there were certain things that I left in the attic at my dad's, and why didn't I take all those things with me? Well, because there's still a piece of you want to leave at home. You don't want to completely give that up yet. I kind of get that. That's kind of what he was doing there. That barn and that location, it was always that way. They kept it under the hay. It was hidden under the hay. That was never locked. Right. I mean, that was the way that they always did it there. And it was safe because it was on a farm.
Yeah, and that in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's a time thing. Like today you wouldn't do that. And you're thinking of today's standards. And I actually that's the part I was questioning too at the time. Like, he's got this there and there's a realtor coming. But again, nobody had come to see the farm yet. The realtor came and said, we got somebody who wants to come and see it sight unseen. And then Clark did his super invisible vision thing, which I'm like, really? That threw that sequence off for me. I've got to admit the vision part did. But everything else I liked, and I questioned what you're saying, so I agree with your question of it, but I think that was that last vestige of leaving that part of him at home.
Yep, you have to have, it's that link. Granted, you have the link of the house and the land and the people there, but those little objects make a big difference as like a little root that you still have there.
Now let's get on to Art's favorite scene, the introduction of Lenny.
Jeez.
Man, I tell you, the Lex Luthor escape, it was needed for the story.
I kind of like it.
There were so many factual inaccuracies. I kept getting angry every time I watched it. And it's one of those things where if I could just sit back and just accept for what it's going to be, but there was just some stuff that just angered me because I personally hate when we get stupid cops. And then especially when you get stupid marshals, because when you're a federal marshal, you are I don't want to say you're a step above the regular cop, because you're not, but you do have more training and you do have more specialties and you're dealing with more stuff. And those two idiots would never have been made marshals. They wouldn't be mall rent-a-cop security guys, much less in charge of watching over prisoners. And there weren't enough guards there. There wasn't enclosed enough. Someone like Lex wouldn't have been on a mill security detail. There's no way Lenny would have just been able to drive into the pit. When you're dealing with potential escaped convicts, shoot first usually comes up a lot. Right. Then ask later. So there's so many things. I'm watching this, and I keep watching, and I'm like, what? No. But the thing that I think that angered me the most was, why didn't the marshals die? He encases him in the car, completely flips the car, goes in the air. It lands on the roof of the ragtop car, and they get out. I'm like, no, but they should be crushed.
Did you have the same issue in Superman 2? Where was the death in Superman 2?
Oh,
name one.
Do you mean with cars flying around and
yeah. I mean, no, I'm with everything Zod and his whole crew were doing in Superman. Right. I'm just saying this is, and I guess what I'm defending is this film series has a history of, except when things like catastrophic, like Krypton happens, or I guess the battle at the end with Superman versus the three villains. And Lois's death, actually, if you look at the first movie, was the only human death that was by some form of disaster, really. Superman pretty much so corrected everything because he went and made the choice to go after the larger group of people first. So everyone really was basically saved by Superman, with the exception of Lois, and that was when he did the whip around to even correct that. So this film series has a history of people not dying. It was a different sort of era.
I know. I would have rather had a body count, especially with those two. I normally don't root for death of cops, but this one I was.
Wow.
Well, then rewatch Man of Steel.
Exactly.
Yeah, you'll see all the death you want there. Yeah,
there's a good body count there.
Oh, God. So John Cryer, the unnecessariness of John Cryer and Superman's hair.
I'm going to contradict a lot of stuff I said. I remember the first time when I watched this back in the 80s, that I did laugh at John Cryer, and I did laugh at this scene, and at the time I understood it and I got it. It's just now I'm a little bit more nitpicky, I'm a little bit more jaded, and there are some stuff that does rub me the wrong ways. And this is there's another scene later on where I go way too in depth on my nitpickiness, but it's one of the things that I wish this movie would have done, because they could have had a legitimate escape sequence with Lex Luthor. They could have gone for such a comedy of errors.
It's interesting because usually in these movies with Lex Luthor, they always lean towards the comedy. That's one of the purposes that Lex Luthor serves, and Gene Hackman does it really well. I see it as like a counterbalance to the genuineness and the non-ironicness of Christopher Reeve's work. You get this really nice counterbalance with Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, who's he's evil and scheming, but he's very nonchalant about things in like a really entertaining way, and it lends itself to this humor. And obviously he surrounds himself with nincompoops, because it makes him feel more important, makes him feel smarter.
I think we'd be remiss too if we didn't talk about, coming before this in the film was this heavy sequence about nuclear war, where you've got a little boy a little boy, was a high school student, I guess, who was in school. There was a debate going on in class about what would you do to stop nuclear war, which is very heavy. It was a heavy topic. And not only was it heavy that he, said, well, and he clearly was the kid in class that everyone thought was like kind of geeky and stuff. Mm-hmm. But he finally spoke up and said, I think they said something about Peter Pan or something like. I forget what the actual comment was. Santa Claus. It was, are you going to ask Santa Claus for it? And he comes back with, no, I'm going to ask Superman. That's who we should be asking. And in this world, Superman's real. So the kid reaches out, and it puts Superman in this position where the Daily Planet's just been taken over. And the people that are taking over the Daily Planet are all about sensationalism, and let's go for the thing it's the headline matters more than the content, which is the reverse of the way that the Daily Planet was prior to that. Right. The headline should lead into the great content. So this kid asks Superman, and I thought that was another brilliant portrayal with Christopher Reeve. Didn't matter. You're wearing the glasses, in the cape, doesn't matter. Superman is faced with this heavy thing of, what do I do here? What is my role here? To the point that he flies to the Fortress of Solitude seeking advice from Krypton on it. And they're like, you should either abandon the planet completely and start a whole new place, or just realize that you can't take this role because you need to let these people make their own choices, or else you're setting up a very dangerous situation of betrayal.
It's
brilliant.
It's the classic Superman conundrum. It's been dealt with, in stories in the comics before. When you have that kind of power and you could do those things, do you? It's a really good question. And like I was saying earlier, it's a laudable idea as an issue to address. I don't know that they go about it as well as they could have here, but it's great that they tried.
Yeah, this was a neat thing about this story. They had a couple, pretty cool plot storylines going throughout this with the Daily Planet buyout, because it's the sensationalism, you talk about it, but also you think back in the 80s, that was kind of like what a lot of people now say was the beginning of the death rattle for newspapers, because that's when the cable news shows started coming around and started growing and gaining popularity. So the Daily Planet would be in a weakened situation at this time. Plus, you do have this arms race and the question of, what do you use all this power for? Should he disarm the planet? Should he not? It's, can you have them put all their faith in in one person, even you? And I liked seeing these two, just the debates going throughout this, the movie, that, again, Superman movies traditionally aren't just about a really powerful guy who beats people up. It's about this man who is also Superman. It's about Clark Kent, who also has these great powers. And I like, again, this movie stayed true to what is the most common theme that goes through, the Superman movies, is Clark dealing with and living in this world.
Yeah. Like we were talking about earlier, about how he stands out, right? In both identities. Yeah,
and I think those periods shine too when he's with Margot Kidder. I just really, I don't think she gets enough credit for how good she really is as Lois Lane with regards to the chemistry with Christopher Reeve. Because seeing her independently of him when she's like at the Daily Planet and stuff, especially in this film, because she's a little older in this film, kind of like, I don't get it. Until you see them together, and then it's kind of like, wow, now I completely understand the attraction, and that part just plays so well in their dialogue moments.
Again, these are actors who now have been doing this for a few movies, and they already had a chemistry in the first movie, and they were cast. I was watching some, I think it's maybe on the DVD or somewhere else, but the screen tests, that they had where Christopher Reeve read with a bunch of actresses.
Yeah.
And they chose her, because of the chemistry that those two had and how she played that role, and the contrast between the character of Lois Lane as portrayed by Margot Kidder, and then contrasting that with what we've been talking about of Christopher Reeve and how he plays these two roles really straight and really honest and really different. I don't know what words to use, but there's a neat kind of a contrast there, and you can see why these two people would be attracted to each other.
I liked the whole idea that Lex's escape and Lex getting together with these arms dealers and things like that, to manipulate them into his plans to destroy Superman. It made sense that Superman was so busy with this big event. And DC's explored this from time to time. The fact that the Justice League is, as a concept, always so involved with the big events that they don't get to the street level stuff. Well, It would make sense that Superman would have that issue as well when he's dealing with, trying to rid the world of its nuclear arms and make a decision like that. I liked when we saw Lex handling those sequences, in the way that, hey, this is a time for me now to really get a plan together to use what Superman's doing to my advantage. There were parts of that got cheesy, but it's funny how I give a major pass to Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor when they go on to that army base and they infiltrate. That music kicks in. That dun dun da da dun 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 dun. I'm like, you know what? You can do anything you want. You can walk in with balloons to the army base. Okay, as long as it's Gene. I don't really mean that, but as long as it's Gene Hackman doing it. Right. I'm going to let that go. There's a lot of things you can find wrong with certain sequences there, but it's Gene Hackman doing it as Lex Luthor. You give it a little bit of a pass.
It makes it okay.
See, you got to slow your roll here, my friend. Slow your roll. Just let's rewind a little bit because you hit on a couple of those points I said that I was getting, when I was watching, I was like, what? And I just kept going through and I'm rewatching and I'm taking notes. So let me start with a couple stuff. First off, I agree Gene Hackman is a talented actor, and I do give him a lot of passes, but there's a couple stuff that kind of angered me and annoyed me.
You're just wrong.
Well, yeah, okay. I've been told that multiple times.
No, go for it. I'm curious.
Okay, one, when he's meeting with the arms dealers. Okay, now I do like the strategery of Lex and how he was going to use Superman's generosity and his general goodness to save the world against him. That was absolutely beautiful, classic Lex Luthor moment. However, the problem with his planning is there are no black market nuclear arms dealers. If there was, we would have suicide and or dirty bombs exploding throughout the U.S. and the world.
Especially in the 80s.
Yes. Plus, the U.S. military, we don't go outside and buy the nukes from other manufacturers. Again, we wouldn't trust anyone with the required plutonium needed to make a nuclear bomb. One of the reasons why we're trying to stop Iran's nuclear program is right there. So, he's meeting these, dirty arms dealers of nuclear weapons. They don't exist.
Jim, take a breath for a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to break something to you.
Okay.
Krypton doesn't exist.
Okay.
There's people flying kryptonite. That stuff doesn't exist.
Cross the line, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah,
come on, man.
There is no Fortress of Solitude.
now, a couple stuff also.
Wait, I'll blow your mind right now. What? Smallville doesn't exist.
Hey, somewhere in the U.S. there is a Smallville, USA. Somewhere.
There's no Metropolis. Or no Daily Planet.
You know what? I had to when I was watching it and we got to the military sequence. I'm like, I will be blown away if Jim doesn't have an issue with some part of this sequence.
I've got a couple more. I'm not done yet.
I figured that. Yes. Breath. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Wait. Let me ask you this before you go back for your breath. Yeah. Do you like Gene? Going back, take this film out of it. Going back to the previous film series, because I think Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor is brilliant. I love him in these movies. Would I cast that Lex Luthor in a film now? Never in a million years. Would I have done it back then? Absolutely, with the tone and the way that these films were made. Do you like him as Lex Luthor, or have you always had a problem with him because of some of the things you're mentioning here?
Okay, first off, I love him as Lex Luthor. I think he's a wonderful actor, and it's this version of Lex isn't my favorite version of Lex. I like what the version we're getting currently in the comic books, where it's not the criminal mastermind, it's the guy who's going to save the world from these aliens. who actually thinks he is the best man for the job because he is that good. No one else can save the world but me because I'm Lex Luthor. And if I got to kill a couple people along the way, hey, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Right. And that's the Lex Luthor I like. Now, that's not the Lex Luthor they wrote here. This is a different Lex, and Gene Hackman plays this Lex beautifully. And this style of Lex is a great style, and I've enjoyed him from one, even through this. I'm picking on stuff, I'm mocking stuff, but I do enjoy seeing him as Lex Luthor. I do enjoy seeing Gene Hackman and Christopher Reeves on screen, and just the when you get those two together, that great chemistry they get. I get that, I enjoy it, but I do have to point out stuff that it's one of those, it's that nitpicking side of me that a lot of times when I look at older movies, I see these things, and I just got to throw it out there.
You know what, though? I could be wrong. I'd have to look back at the history of this, but I don't know if we would have the scheming businessman Lex Luthor if it weren't for how Lex Luthor is portrayed in these movies, because prior to this, he was Lex Luthor, in the purple costume, right?
Right.
Building robots and stuff. And then in these movies, and I kind of remember at the time there being, like lots of question marks, like, well, why are they portraying him like this? This is Lex Luthor. This is someone else. But I suspect it's the influence of Gene Hackman in this role, or at least how the role was written in the screenplay, that affects how John Byrne had turned that character around.
Yeah, and I've seen interviews, and I've heard interviews that Gene Hackman did kind of change the character around from when that first movie came out. Like, he refused to shave his head bald. He refused to wear a skull cap. He flat out said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he had a mustache up until like the day before... filming, and he refused to shave it, and they finally got him to shave it because the director said, hey, I'll shave mine if you shave yours. He goes, sure, no problem. So
I've read that, yeah.
So Hackman goes and shaves off his mustache, and he walks up on stage for the director to shave his mustache, and the director goes and peels off his mustache. He had the makeup department make him a fake mustache, just so he could, make the bet with Hackman to shave his off. So, I give full credit to Hackman and just his portrayal, his personalization of, of Lex Luthor, just like Christopher Reeves personalized Superman. Each of these actors are true actors, and they're really good actors. So when I criticize, I'm criticizing out of love.
Well, and Art's 100% correct. In '86, the Man of Steel limited series, Byrne did redesign Lex Luthor from scratch. I mean, he made him into a more contemporary character. That's where he became the business mogul. So that the films predate that comic series. This really was the building blocks to the Lex you like.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, hold on. Now I got to finish up my issues.
Oh, please.
Okay, now, one, Lex Luthor is out of uniform. Flat out. That is not a valid uniform in any way, shape, or form. Now, the arms dealer next to him, pretty good, pretty good usage. I think, that could pass. But Lex, no. Flat out, no. Plus, Lex made himself a 5-star general. Now, with Lex's ego, yes, it would make sense for him to say, I am a 5-star general. But here's the problem with the 5-star. They only exist during times of war, and there's only ever one of them. There's not multiple generals. It's not a...
But that's the kind of mistake that Lex would make because he's so egotistical.
Jim, you do understand that was meant to be a comedy sequence, right?
Yes, I know.
Okay, they were like sitting, when they were writing that, they were not sitting there going, let's make this historically accurate.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I get what...
verisimilitude.
I think you're 100% right in what you're saying. I don't think they sat there and said, I think if anybody brought up the fact that he would be out of uniform, they kept it that way because it would be funny. That was the whole point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, hold on. I get the humor behind it. I'm making fun myself. So, but I got to say this stuff. But the other thing I do have to say, and I don't get to say this often on the show, so let's bring it out for episode 400. Regulation haircuts, please. Collar, off the ear. Come on. You know, you
That's
look
the thing
at
that always gets
those
me,
guys,
too.
man. Oh my God! Please, you got visiting brass coming for this, monumental launch, and you're not going to make sure you're nice, neat, high, and tight. Come on.
That's the thing that always gets me in movies and TV shows too, is the haircuts on military personnel and how they do the salute.
Yeah.
They're always doing it wrong somehow.
Do you think that's a problem sometimes when you cast names to certain military roles? That, like, you almost should cast people with the intention, like, hey, you're playing a role here. You need to go with the haircut. I always admire actors we've had actresses that have shaved their head bald for a role. I admire that so much so when they're like, this is what needs to happen for this role, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. I think I admire it even more when a female does it because of the fact that it's such an identifying trait on a woman is her hair. For a male to, like, not, if you're playing a military type character, I joke around with Jim whenever, you bring up the regulation haircut, but I think I give leeway to it in a comedy sequence because of the fact that it's a comedy. When it's more of a serious role, and I would even argue it in this case, I'll go with that, you're trying to set a whole military thing there, even if there was some kind of hair covering, like a wig, because they did that with Gene Hackman in the first movie, when he pulled his thing off and he had the skull cap off at the end, because at the very end they finally showed a bald Lex. And they did the skull cap thing. I am Lex Luthor, and he rips it off. You could have done something like that with the hair in this to have given that perception, and I would have been fine with that as well. I didn't. I knew when he walked in with the outfit and with the hair. I'm like, oh, Jim is so going to have a problem with this.
Now, here's the thing. The funny thing with Lex. Mm-hmm. One, with comedies, I am a lot more lenient. I'm making funny here. Yeah, when I watched A Few Good Men, those I would have been furious if I would have actually seen stuff like this mistakes. But that was an intent. That was a military drama that was needed to be very accurate. This is a comedy, so there's leeways, and even when you get Lex as a general, no one's going to tell him, hey, hero, tighten up there. He's not going to get no one's going to razz him about the length of his hair just because of his ranking. But it's funny because when I look at movies, any movie, those are the kind of stuff I do notice first off. With the cops, how the cops are acting, or any law enforcement type people, military, how they're acting, how they look. Like the one guy didn't call him sir, and Lex reminded him. Again, that's Lex being Lex being arrogant, making the soldier say sir. But in reality, you get somebody with a star around you, there is a serious oh my God factor going on that you're going to dot your I's, cross your T's, and do everything correct. There's no way you ever have to remind someone to say sir when you got a star on your shoulder, much less multiple stars. So it's so I laughed at it because it's Lex Luthor, but then I look at it going, come on, guys,
It really isn't the focal point of the movie.
No.
I mean, that sequence lasts a matter of a couple of minutes. And the whole point of that was just to get that missile into space to destroy the film. Because agreeing, I'm not saying that sequence didn't have flaws. It did, sure. But you kind of chuckle and laugh at it. To me, the serious tone of everything leading up to that, and the stuff with Superman that was going on, I mean, there was some really deep drama going on. So when they did these comedy bits, they were so short that they really didn't bother me any because it was encapsulated by so many great Superman moments that I was just kind of like, okay, who cares? I mean, this is, I mean, we're 40 minutes in the sequence that we're talking about. At that point, I was very forgiving because of the content around it. But admittedly, there's something to be forgiving of. It was really, when the missile went up into space, that was the part that, like, oh, no, please, no. Because then that created the part of the film. I really have passionate, significant problems with Nuclear Man.
Yes, let's talk about Nuclear Man, shall we?
Why Lex's voice? Why not let the actor do his own voice? Because I think that was part of the problem with Nuclear Man. If he had his own voice, I think maybe that actor could have, brought something to the table. Yeah,
he's such a. It's interesting. You have Christopher Reeve as Superman, who has this like slicked back hair, like very old fashioned kind of haircut, very straight arrow, old fashioned kind of guy. And then you've got like Nuclear Man, who's got this spare arms and more exposed skin, and he's got this blow dried hair, right? He's like really tan. He's kind of like the opposite of Superman in terms of his appearance. His costume is really flashy. It's an interesting contrast in terms of his look to Superman. So I'll give him that from a design standpoint. But you're right, the actor isn't given much to work with.
That's part of the problem. See, there were two things that really broke Nuclear Man for me. The appearance, I guess, becomes a huge problem for me when he looks like he's out of an 80s music video. And I honestly,
Yes.
I'll be honest with you, I would have probably given that to him without an issue if the voice and the sound effects surrounding any fight sequences. This is where it started to get Saturday morning cartoon for me. And I love Saturday morning cartoons. But when you have, and this is actually a problem I have with this and our next movie, when you have deep, strong themes like you're dealing with Superman, you're getting into some really heavy stuff with this nuclear arms issue that they're talking about. I didn't mind you had like the comedic moments with Lex. I gave a pass to those. But you jump from that, and maybe this validates some of what Jim's saying, because now you jump from that to Nuclear Man, who he has Lex's voice, which makes him very cartoony. The voice, even though it matches up, never seems to fit and it almost diminishes him. But then when he's fighting, the sound effects, like, you're almost better off really letting them hit each other so we hear that. Because the sound effects were like, these weird little sounds that like should belong down the Snorks or something.
It's kind of like we're watching an episode of the Power Rangers.
Yes, exactly. It took a film that like 40 minutes before I was like, I'm really enjoying all of this. Even the comedy bits that there's some validity to what you're saying, Jim. But I'm still enjoying the film at this point. He comes in and I'm like, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? You've just derailed this whole thing. And he was surrounded by some great beats, which we'll talk about. But Nuclear Man, did any of you like Nuclear Man?
No, nobody likes Nuclear Man.
The concept of Nuclear Man, where Lex uses Superman's actions and charging up in the sun, and that the concept of creating this super powerful being that matches Superman's strength using Superman's own DNA, I like that concept.
Sure.
But the actual execution, not so much.
Yeah.
It's kind of all downhill from there. In terms of any time Nuclear Man is on screen, this movie becomes weaker, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, by this time in the movie, I was like, oh God. So I think I was like tapping out. So I was beaten.
Out.
I was enjoying it more because of the pain.
See, and I'll be honest with you, I watched this twice in preparation for this. Superman 4 is traditionally the one that I don't remember. The one thing that stands out for me about this film is always Nuclear Man. I remember just vehemently hating Nuclear Man. So when I watched this, I watched it twice for this, not because I had to. I wanted to watch it again because I was kind of baffled by my first viewing. Because I didn't remember so much, by the time I got 40 minutes into this film, I was like sitting here, wait, shouldn't I be hating this? And I found that I was, and I found like I was really enjoying the experience until he showed up. Then I'm like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, now I remember why.
This is where it's broken.
And this is where the movie breaks in half.
Yeah. It's funny because you have this introduction of what we hate, and we all hate it across the board. But then right after it, we get a scene that when we first talked about doing this movie, this was the first scene that popped in my head, and I still chuckled then. I chuckled today, and I liked the scene, and I'm talking about the double date. Because after we get this Nuclear Man thing, then we get this double date.
Well, we got the aerobic sequence. The aerobic sequence came before that.
What?
The aerobic sequence came before that.
All right.
Oh, he did? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, yeah, you had to have the aerobics because that's where she asks, Clark out. But the double date thing, I really like that scene. So it's funny.
Yeah, it's a classic bit too. It's a classic thing that's been done in movies many times.
Before we talk, because we're going to talk deeply about the double date, because this kind of the aerobic sequence we kind of talked about earlier, but Nuclear Man meeting Lex for the first time is probably the bit where I want to express my own hatred for her. Because I am the father now. I'm like, really? I did like the premise that the son pulled the plug on him. You know, like when they realized that, like, okay, he's out of the sunlight now. That I thought was a cool concept, and I think that's what you were alluding to before, Jim. And I agree with you on that. But then that's followed with, oh no, he's like cold. I mean, Lenny is a Valley girl. I mean, you were teasing about this before, Jim. It's two things. It was almost like stereo, because I was enjoying Lex Luthor in that sequence. And if you take out both Nuclear Man and Lenny, I loved Lex in those sequences. Everything he was saying worked for me. I can isolate the parts with Gene Hackman speaking and go, wow, Gene Hackman's hitting a home run. But why did they put those people in the room with him? Just let him talk by himself.
It's impressive that he's able to hold his own and to stand his ground, despite being in this scene, basically.
Well, again, it's talented actor. He is one of those amazing actors, and you put him in a movie like this, he's gonna shine. And you put him in a scene like that, and there's still going to be his strength of his just personal strength.
And once again, he's played this character a couple times now, and he really knows what he's doing. So he's completely confident.
I would be curious to how they shot the sequence that Jim's really going to now, the Super Double Date. Because did Christopher Reeve shoot all the Clark Kent sequences at the same time and then shoot the Superman ones? Or, did they... I would imagine that's the way they had to have done it. If they flip-flopped them, whatever they did, his ability to be two distinctly different people in that sequence, I thought was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and the comedy worked so well because of the seriousness of that intermixed.
It's kind of a little tour de force for Christopher Reeve, really, that sequence.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm the guy who says he doesn't like super dorky Clark, but I love this scene. And I chuckled, as I said, I chuckled then, I chuckled today, rewatching it, the movie a couple times, because this is just that great moments, because again, it's physical acting, it's the actual abilities that he has, and just his rapport that he has with Margot Kidder as Clark Kent, then his rapport he has as Superman, and you see the transition and the changes between the three of them. I was like, man, this is really cool.
See, I think, and this is the reason I go back to again, and this sequence I think broadcasts what I was talking about earlier about there being a third persona in there. You have the super dorky Clark Kent that gets away with it. Like when the luggage cart comes in and he's on the front of it. And you can see the demeanor change when she's out of eye shot that, okay, she's gone. Now I need to go jump in the back of the car, turn into Superman and go. And I think then he drops on a persona as Superman. It's the guy that goes into the car. That's the real guy.
Yeah.
Superman's another persona that goes onto the roof. He loses that persona when he goes and leaves, or when he hears about an emergency, or, thinks he's got to go back to being Clark. There's three personas at work here, and I really love that aspect of Superman. I don't think it's keyed on enough, because I think that that's true in the comics as well, in some of the best writing, is the recognizing that Superman's a bit of a mask, too, because he can never be his real self when he's Superman. Right. Even though he's able to demonstrate his powers, he still can't tell everyone that he's Clark Kent, too. It's only in those in-between times that we really get to see the real guy. I think that's where he connects with Batman, because Batman also has three personas. And I think it's a cool part in this film, because I don't see it done very often. And when it's done, and done this well, it really shines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree.
Oh, yeah. And it was funny, something I noticed... I don't remember from previous watchings, but when Lois is talking to Clark about the questions that what's his name, Warfield wants her to ask, the one question is Superman a plot to weaken the U.S. defenses? I actually liked that question. I was like, you know what? That actually...
That's actually a good question.
Yeah, well, present day, that would be a question you would ask Superman, and that's something we're seeing in the current continuity in the comics, that current sentiment. So I thought that was a really cool thing to have in there, kind of a nice foreshadowing to what is the current mindset towards Superman.
I liked Lois's reaction to it, though, because I agree. Amen on what you're saying. I agree with you. But the part is, this is Superman who has a strong relationship with Lois. Not only with Lois, he gets his mail sent to the Daily Planet. So now you've got to go and ask him, this guy that you've had such a great relationship, so many exclusives with. You've got to ask him that question. I could see that being something where you're like, whoa, this is really uncomfortable. I think it only adds to what you're saying. It doesn't take away from it.
Yeah.
I wish he would have never left for the emergency.
Yeah.
Because now the emergency puts him into one of the great sequences in the film and one of the worst sequences in the film at the same time. Because you get what Art was talking about earlier. Gene Hackman versus Christopher Reeve. What a brilliant sequence. It could have kept going and going, and they could have just ended the film and just said, to be honest with you, we forgot to write the rest of the script. So we're going to leave you to choose your own. Yeah, exactly. We're going to leave you to choose your own adventure here. I think people would have walked out of the film and just been like, wow, that was really satisfying. I wish I would have seen where it was going to go, but I really was satisfied by that. This is where the cartoon effects, I think, really became the first battle between Clark, the budget issues. The budget issues, I think, shined here because they go to the Great Wall of China. That battle, that right there was for me, this is like the deal breaker. This is the part where I'm like, you know what? If I could have forgiven anything else, this is where, this sealed the coffin for Nuclear Man. I don't care if he all of a sudden dropped Lex Luthor's voice and became an orator in the rest of the film. I would never have forgiven everything leading up to this. He destroys the Great Wall, which then sets up the scenario for Super Engineer. Because I liked Superman rescuing the person that was falling off it. That was cool. I'm like, okay, the classic Superman bit, hoorah. Then we make the decision to do that. You couldn't have said, we have no budget for this. Let's just at the end do a Daily Planet headline, Superman repairs the Great Wall.
Right.
And show him with some bricks. You had to do this.
I'm glad you said, Sean, that it went from great moments to terrible moments because we've all said this, and I'm going to reiterate one more time. Just the Superman Lex Luthor face-to-face moments, two talented actors, and those great dialogue. I love you've already broken all the laws of man. Now you've broken the laws of nature. Just that tete-a-tete between the two of them. But also, I love the fact that Lex acknowledges Superman's the only one who can keep up with him because Superman figured out Lex put whatever he put on the nuke. Mm-hmm. And I thought that, for me, those were some really cool moments. And then you get to this Great Wall of China battle where if you look on the Great Wall of China when this battle's going on, I don't see any Chinese people on the wall. Now, yes, tourism, people from other parts of the world visiting, yes, but there should at least be one on that wall.
I came across something online reading up about this movie about one of the effects of the low budget was the location shooting. Not that they would have gone all the way to shoot that in China anyway, but apparently there were lots of places that they filmed in the previous movies, filming in New York and stuff, which they couldn't do, and so they filmed in Ottawa, Canada or something, and tried really hard to make it look like New York.
I can fix this in a moment, because there was a line from Lex Luthor that made me realize how to fix this movie. He said, I want to introduce you. Well, actually, I'll go back. Clark comes off with this line. It's common knowledge that you hate children and animals, Luthor. What are you doing back in Metropolis? Lex comes back with, I wanted to introduce you to the new kid on the block. Now, bear with me here. What if we turned the film, the nuclear warhead goes off into space, it explodes, that bubble comes out, and it's actually the new kids on the block? Not with Lex's voice. Yeah, it's them fighting Superman. Now, tell me that wouldn't have been a better movie. I'm not saying it would have been a great movie. It's not Nuclear Man. It's the New Kids on the Block, and we get to see Superman punching them.
I was just going to say, but then you have Superman punching minors, and I don't think that's right.
Well, that's true too. But again, it would have meant no Nuclear Man.
No, good point. Good point. That is, I'll have to consider that.
Because I actually, I'm weighing that out because you put an inherent flaw in my logic there, and I agree with you. But I'm like, but that's still not Nuclear Man.
Nuclear Man is essentially unredeemable. There's nothing. I'm trying to think of something that would be worse.
Hold on, I got some redeemable quality for Nuclear Man.
Okay.
Yeah, you think back to, so we get this whole fight sequence, and we get to that death blow scene, right, where he waits until Clark's holding the Statue of Liberty and can't defend himself. You got to admit that was some solid strategery on his part. Sure. Make sure when Superman couldn't fight back. So there's some good there. Right there is a moment for Nuclear Man. One moment.
I disagree because I didn't even like the Super Scratch. I get what you're saying. I liked the idea that Superman got sick, so I'm going to give you. Let me put back off. Your point is well met in the sense that it led to something cool. I don't think there was anything satisfying about how Superman got there. I liked the fact that Superman got ill, which is where you're going with this, and I agree with you. Because I thought that led to a great sequence with Lois that I really enjoyed. It was like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this film is so broken here. Then we got that wonderful sequence with Lois, and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm liking this again. The cape on the Statue of Liberty, too, I thought was really cool. I thought it was a dramatic moment in a film that needed that, because the battle didn't have much of that for me, but that really did, and I thought that was cool. That leading to him being sick and Lois going to him. We don't often see Superman so broken down like we saw here. And I thought that was a great choice in the film that really needed something to bring me back in because I was gone at this point.
I mean, this movie really is like these big chunks of cheesy bad stuff and then these chunks of these actors who know their roles really well at this point and who have good chemistry having good scenes together. Like it alternates good, bad, good, bad.
Here's the thing. I got to ask you both an opinion on something. Because this is another one that I never really thought anything of it until just now. When we have the death of Superman byline, the scene that it leads to Lacey standing up to her dad and leads to kind of her redemption and even leads into further the whole Lois visiting Clark. But it kind of gets to me because that actually was actual news that was being put on the newspaper. We have this fight of Superman fighting Nuclear Man. We get the super kick. His cape flies off, and Superman's never seen again. It would be reasonable and or responsible journalism to say, is Superman dead? And that would be a reasonable byline to have in there.
You want to hear something interesting?
Except it didn't say that, though, didn't it? Didn't it say Superman dead, like implying Superman is dead?
I thought it had a question mark. It had a question mark. Dead? Superman dead, question mark.
Oh.
And that was the byline.
There is a fan edit. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these, but there's lots of them out there. Someone edited together Superman 3 and Superman 4. It's called Superman Redeemed. It actually does a pretty decent job of weaving together the storylines. And at the point where Nuclear Man scratches Superman, it's at that point that they added in all the stuff with the evil Superman from Superman 3.
Oh, that's funny.
That's cool.
Yeah, see? That kind of works.
See, I like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's not a great fan edit because you still have all this bad, dumb stuff, but it was interesting to watch. And they remove all the stuff with Lacey and the newspaper, and instead they add in a lot of the Smallville stuff from Superman 3 with Lana Lang.
Oh, cool.
And I kind of weaved that in somehow. I can't remember. It's been a while since I watched it. I watched it in an attempt to redeem Superman 3 and Superman 4. Which are both problematic movies.
We almost could have done a whole thing on Superman 3 as well for very similar reasons. Superman dead, the question mark is there. You're right.
Okay.
You know, it's funny talking about Superman 3, just to go on a little tangent for that one. What, for you guys, seeing as we threw it out there, what is your memory or impression of Superman 3? Where are you at on that film in the series? Because 1 and 2, I think we pretty much so universally said we enjoy both of those movies. What about 3 in the rankings? Where does that fall for you guys?
I really like Superman 3. I really like about half of that movie. I love all the stuff with Superman and Clark and Lana and Smallville and that whole storyline. And I like the whole storyline with the split Superman, the evil Superman, and then how he splits himself in two and defeats himself and all that. It's all the Richard Pryor and Robert Vaughn stuff that just is terrible. And one of the reasons is because, what's the name of the bad guy, the millionaire bad guy? What's his name? I can't remember the character's name, but he's clearly, they couldn't get Lex Luthor, basically. So we'll just make up this other guy who's rich and has a scheme.
I forget his name too. That part I could have done without, but I'm with you. I liked the fact that it was Kryptonite that did it. You know, it was a Kryptonite variant, which goes back to comic history.
Right.
I liked the battle between the two Supermen. That part was really...
It's a great scene.
Well, you know what? To me, the battle in the compactor, where, you know, Superman bursts out after, or Clark bursts out afterwards, and then you see him rip open the shirt, and he's got the, you know, Superman. That part was awesome.
It is awesome. It's a great sequence. It's interesting, like, how Christopher Reeve does a great job playing the evil Superman. He is genuinely scary. Really does a good job of making this guy seem, you look at him and go, oh, this is a terrible idea.
I think that was I think that's why that movie worked, even though it had I think in many ways that probably had more slapstick than this film.
Yes, it does, I think.
But I think where it worked was the villain was so believable in the fact that it was Superman. You know, that by the time you got to the end, you wanted to see him go against the bad guys and take them out. Because I didn't like the bad guy characters, but...
Boring.
Yeah, they really were. But by the end, what they had done to Superman became the villain of the film.
That's interesting.
And it was kind of like a cleanup epilogue when he finally got down to taking them out. And I didn't mind the whole video game thing where it was them, you know, going up against Superman. And I liked Richard Pryor's redemption in it. I didn't mind Richard Pryor, who was there for a lot of comedy bits, but I didn't really mind him in it. I liked him. I don't think that movie falls. That movie doesn't fall very. I rewatch that quite often. It's not up there with 1 and 2. There's a distance between them, but I enjoy that movie. Jim, what about you? Are you where does that fall for you?
Well, with me, Superman 3, I remember when I watched it, it was such a fall off from 2 for me that I was like, oh, God. And then Superman 4 came out, and I was like, wow, Superman 3 is not that bad. You know, so... So for, you know, and in later years when I rewatched Superman 3, I was like, you know, that's not that bad of a movie. There was issues. I had issues with it, but as a general rule, it was something that I never called it a really horrific movie. I said it wasn't as good as 1 and 2, but there was some cool stuff. I did like you mentioned Richard Pryor. I like how he ripped off from the company, and even it's funny, even present day, people will call that the Superman 3, virus or the Superman 3 scam, where every so often someone in a bank gets the idea, hey, I wonder if that would actually work.
Yeah, and the half pennies.
The half pennies and this and that. And, there have been people who have looked for that general ledger, and they call it the Superman 3 ledger. So it actually does... It has some present day modern recourses.
Well, that explains actually your behavior earlier, Jim, in this recording, when you started having your ranting and raving. That was due to a kryptonite incident at your work.
Exactly.
Oh, man. I think it's Richard Pryor's style of acting, which I think it doesn't blend with anyone else's style, really. His character really stands out, really odd, in a way that I don't think happens in any of the other movies, I think. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but that occurred to me. I
didn't have a problem with Richard Pryor. I think, Art, you put it best. It was the billionaire and his crew that I was kind of like, they came off as being, and you said it, you're like, maybe they couldn't get Gene Hackman.
Right.
They came off as Lex Light.
Right.
And that never works when you've got that impression right away. Lana was great. I thought
I
that
love that whole story.
Absolutely, that all worked. Richard Pryor, because he wasn't meant to be an archetype for any other character, it was
Right.
really clear that they created that role with the intention of letting somebody in Richard Pryor's wheelhouse, a comedian, kind of have an
Right.
endearing role. I quite liked him.
It's interesting. It works in a way because he's not offensive. He's not the bad guy. He's just a guy who gets in too deep, basically.
But then has an opportunity to redeem himself with Superman.
Right.
And I think we would all I think we all have our own inherent flaws. And Richard Pryor was clearly flawed, made some really bad choices, but I never got the impression that he was a bad guy. He made bad choices. So I think he's more relatable to the viewer. And the people that were broken were the billionaires.
Yeah.
That was really wrong.
And again, they couldn't get Gene Hackman for the movie. He was so angry at them over everything that happened with Donner and everything that happened with Marlon Brando and just everything that was going on there. He said no way. He flat out refused to do the movie. So that's why they didn't have him in for the third movie.
Yeah, I remember reading that too.
One thing I want to talk about during the battle with Nuclear Man that I actually did like.
Round two?
No,
Round two!
The part where they were fighting in the lava with the streets, and all that
okay.
part going on. And Superman uses his heat vision to cut off the top part of the mountain and uses that super strength of feet to cap it off. The physics of that does not work, and I agree that the science doesn't. But that's comic book history. If you go back to like the Silver Age superpowered Superman, the one who could move planets and things, because he moved a moon in this. I mean, he did. So I mean, clearly they were tapping into the Silver Age stuff because this Superman predates. In its original creation with Donner, predates Byrne's revamp. So this really is more kind of hearkening back to the 70s and earlier concept of him. So I quite like the fact that, okay, this is a Superman with his heat vision that cuts off the top of a mountain, caps off of it. I would rather have seen more of that kind of stuff than engineering vision that magically corrects the wall of China. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I agree with criticisms of that because the science doesn't work and stuff. Okay, I get that. It's that part of it's where I'm kind of like, okay, this is comic booky. I'm supposed to suspend my disbelief here. This is also the same guy that whipped backwards around a planet and turned back time. That doesn't work either, but I'm going to give it some leeway because it's Superman. I would rather them get clever with stuff like that than some of the choices that they made here.
Here's the thing with me in that sequence, because the physics behind it, I didn't have an issue with him cutting off the mountain and capping it, because again, it's Superman, and I do have that suspension of disbelief. The issue I have, and it's an issue I always have in movies when lava is involved.
Oh no.
Oh, yeah.
Lava doesn't move as fast as they have it moving. Lava flow isn't the danger. Lava is super slow. You could outwalk lava.
Wow.
The problem you have with volcanoes exploding is that initial eruption, because there's a massive amount of energy that's being released and you get debris and whatnot falling. Plus also you've got the ash and the chemicals that fall when you have that initial explosion. That's the stuff that kills people. The lava itself, those people could have very easily outwalked it and not have had an issue with it.
That would have been a great movie tool. You see these people easily outwalking the lava. Superman, take your time, cap off the mountain. We're not in any danger. That's way more. That's way more drama building than these people are going to be covered in lava in seconds, and the priest is saying prayers because they're all going to die.
I have lava issues in movies too, but it more has to do with the notion of convection. In movies, a lot of times, tangent. The third Star Wars prequel, where they have a big fight on the lava planet. You can't do that. You can't be that close to lava that long. You will die. Your clothes will burn off. and then your skin will burn off. Makes me crazy.
It's funny how I think we all do that. We have certain things that that are like our thing. We just nitpick. And when I say nitpick, I mean, it's maybe because of our experiences, we're more grounded in reality with that particular portion of it. I'm a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy, obviously, by the fact that I do this, but all forms of sci-fi and fantasy. So when you start talking Star Wars and Star Trek, but I mean, I'll get into, Shannara books and dragons and dungeons and all that, everything that you can imagine that falls into those categories in video gaming and, in media. I gravitate towards that stuff. But there's times where there's certain shows where people have inherent problems with a specific sequence because of the broken science of it, and I can totally see what they're talking about, but I had no issue at all. I'm like, I can move along, it's just great. But I'll pick out something like super telekinesis in this and say to myself, this is a huge problem. Superman does not have telekinesis. It's like the lava thing. You both are right. You're 100% correct in your issues with lava. You're right. I have a bigger issue with super telekinesis than I have with the lava.
That's funny.
That part's really broken for me. I don't like it at all. I don't care that Nuclear Man threw him up there. I didn't like Nuclear Man at all, so there was nothing that he was going to do that was right for me. But Superman's solution to it was I would have rather seen the people drop because Superman was catching a Buick than to see him save them with super telekinesis. That's how bad I am with it.
Here's the other thing. In that whole sequence, because there's another part in that fight scene, the round 2 with Superman and Nuclear Man, that, again, it was something that I never caught until, actually it was probably my second or third watching of the movie. One of the actors shows up, it's when the SWAT shows up. And one of the actors shows up and he's carrying a law rocket system. That's a shoulder-mounted system,
and it's disposable.
Yeah, it's the foldable, expandable, disposable unit, and he's holding it not on his shoulder. He's holding it in front of him like it's a regular gun.
You can't do that.
Yeah, this system,
you'll kill yourself.
Exactly. So I'm sitting there looking at it, and I go, "Wait a minute, is that a law?" What the? And I rewound. I'm like, hey, he's holding it right on his chest, and I'm like, oh man,
Jim, hold on. This is where I think you're totally watching the movie wrong. Who is he looking at when he did that?
Oh, he was going to fire it at Nuclear Man.
Exactly. He's looking at Nuclear Man and saying, I can put this directly in front of me and end my misery.
This man is giving me problems. I'm going to end my life.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm in this movie looking at that guy. I just heard him speak. Superman's using telekinesis.
I've got to end this. Yeah. I can't take any more.
There's lava issues in this film.
It's funny, though, about the law rocket. I have used a law rocket, and you can't be behind them.
No, you can't.
It's a pretty basic thing.
And wait. I think you're glossing over the fact that Art just told us how he negotiates his comic book contracts.
All right, guys, listen up. The back blast area is not all clear.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
So I also think this fight was... there's got to be a bunch of cut footage from that. Because you think about just how Christopher Reeves was really trying to save the scene with a lot of his, but the people, and just you could see there's probably a lengthy dialogue that was going on between him and Nuclear Man. And they probably cut a bunch of it down to just, if you will not tell me, I will hurt people. I want to know what ended up cut in that scene. Because I think there's more there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if that footage exists. I know that I did a YouTube search on this movie, and there's a lot of little extended cut, deleted scene things. I haven't looked at many of them, but there might be something in there.
Nuclear Man reads Shakespeare during one of the cut scenes, I think.
Maybe.
I actually would like to see... I'm a big fan of that, too. When you were expressing that earlier, Art, I was really connecting with you because there's a lot of films like Supergirl. Did you guys all see Supergirl?
Yeah.
There was a director's cut version of that added in footage, and it's actually a much better movie.
It's much longer, unfortunately.
But there's actually sequences in there. Like it when I was watching it, I'm like sitting here like they made edits in the wrong places.
Yeah.
Green Lantern, I think, has this same problem. Yeah. They cut out certain things from Green Lantern that are in the director's cut that I think add to motivations where maybe they could have trimmed in different areas and achieved the same time frame that they were looking for, but kept certain emotional motivations in there. Because I think the director's cut of that movie is much better. And I question a lot of times, sometimes I think maybe directors or whoever does the editing, they almost need another person to go back who maybe has never seen the film before.
Well, you realize just how important editing is.
Yeah.
It can make or break a movie.
Daredevil also has that issue. The director's cut of Ben Affleck's Daredevil, I think.
I have not seen the director's cut.
Yeah, there's sequences in that go back in that I'm like, wow, those are like really important sequences that improve the movie.
Yes.
And I think that they're, obviously they were shooting for a time frame. That's what always ends up happening with these films when they do that. And you question if like cuts shouldn't have happened elsewhere and they could have made a better movie by clearing it up that way and pacing wise.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this movie could have done with some of this too.
One sequence,
editing.
Two sequences I wouldn't have cut are actually the ones that follow the first flight. We started talking about the Lois and Clark, and one of the things that I really want to talk about with that one is Lois Lane is in a world where it's clear that when she doesn't have her memory of the fact that she and Clark and Superman, that was a relationship at one point in time, Clark is a colleague to her. He's not on her radar as a love interest. She's all about Superman. But yet she's protective of Clark. Mm-hmm. And maybe subconsciously there's that part of her that knows that never has faced it.
Right.
But she goes to his apartment, and this is a guy who clearly is looking horrid. We see him get progressively worse during that, and especially after that sequence. But in that moment, Lois, inspires him by opening up about who, him, kind of buck up and all that, but also Superman and the reality of, hey, I know you have a connection or contact with Superman. Can you tell him this? And she lays out her feelings, and she's really telling it to Superman, like, I know you're not perfect, and I'm not expecting you to be. But one of the things that I love about you is the fact that you keep trying to protect us. You are there for us, and I know whatever's happened to you, that you ultimately are going to step up and make the right decision. You are going to find a way. She's really connecting with the humanity that's in between Clark and Superman in that moment by telling the wounded part of Superman exactly what he needs to hear. It's those moments where people go, why does Superman, out of all the people in the world, why Lois Lane? She's not always necessarily the prettiest. She's not always the smartest.
Right.
There is a beauty to her. There is a strength to her. There is a smarts to her, but it's the whole package of those things and the way it works for Lois that it's almost sometimes Clark latches on to the fact that in those moments she's real with him. There is no pretense. There's no drama. It's just her being a real human being, the way his parents would have been with him. And in those moments, I'm like, I totally get this in those moments. That sequence to me, this is not one of my favorite films, but I would watch this film again to get to those sequences. I'd probably fast forward through certain parts, and I know I likely will, but it's one of the reasons why I cannot say at the end of this discussion that I won't watch this movie again. I will, because there's so much in it that I did like, in spite of the stuff that I really detested.
In that moment, when Lois is talking to the sick Clark, do you think that she knows that Clark and Superman are the same person and she's just pretending? Because it's a lot of stuff to say to Clark that she wants Clark to say to Superman. You know what I mean? You could read that as her knowing and out of respect for Clark acting as if she doesn't.
I'm gonna give you my answer. I don't think it negates yours because we're all making our own judgment as far as what's happening there because we can't get into Lois's head and really know what's going on. My feeling was that was a Lois who she loves Superman. She's so frustrated that she can't reach out to Superman directly, and Clark is the only connection to do that. Right. So she has the opportunity there to unleash something that she's been bottling up, because you saw her reaction at the news when she's running in there and defending him to Lacey and to her dad and having those moments. But that's my impression, my reading into it. The funny part is that I don't know that you're wrong in yours.
It's clear with your interpretation. Honestly, I think I prefer. It's interesting. In a way, it's more interesting because she's opening up to this person who she knows that she can trust. She knows without a shadow of a doubt that she can trust Clark.
Here's where I think you're correct in part of your assumptions there. It goes back to what I said earlier. I think there's a subconscious thing where, without realizing that, there's qualities of Clark that no matter how good his act is, no matter how good he does the bumbling, no matter how much he, like with the dress sequence with Lacey, Clark didn't acknowledge it at all, which is exactly what Lois expected. But there's times where Clark, like what Clark did at the Daily Planet where he spoke up to Lacey, there were qualities hidden in there that are Superman. There's qualities in Superman when he's giving his big speeches and being his dun-da-da Superman moments that are uniquely Clark. I think it goes to that third person that I'm mentioning. That third person is a connecting thread between the two guys. And there's elements of both of them that are the real Clark. So they can't help but at some point in time revealing in both personas those qualities. And Lois may not be able to voice that, or maybe she can in her head. I don't know. I always liked the mystery. It's kind of like, does Jim Gordon know that Bruce Wayne's Batman?
Right.
There's times where I fully believe that he does. There's times where I believe that he chooses not to pursue that so much because he respects Batman that he denies what's in front of him. I wonder if Lois does the same thing with Superman where she goes through this battle. I don't know. It's always an interesting thing for me, so that's why I was very cautious to say that I don't know that I disagree with you. I like the debate. I think it's interesting. You can look at sequences like that, and I think it fits a lot of different viewpoints on it.
Yeah.
I think it's why these characters were so attracted to them when they're done well.
Yeah. It's always best. It's like in a horror movie, it's always more interesting to leave stuff out than to show everything. It's more interesting to leave room for interpretation into what is going through Lois's head. How much does Lois know? How much will she allow herself to think, Yeah.
Lex Luthor's part with, we decided to increase your commissions. The voices of the villains here, I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they just gave up or they started getting wacky races. Yeah. Like, you remember that cartoon Wacky Races? I kept expecting them to have mustaches that were gradually growing a la Pinocchio, and they started twisting them going, yes? I mean, it was like, what was going on there? Like, I was actually, and you shouldn't be doing this, I was hoorahing when Lex was taking them down. Because I'm like, I get it. It's like Lex is, at this point saying, get out of here. And if you want references, forget it. I'm like, I am all in Lex Luthor's court. If he didn't have "and what do you fear" standing next to him, that would have been a brilliant sequence of events.
Oh, man. Once again, Gene Hackman doing everything he can despite his surroundings.
Yeah. Gene Hackman saves the day, kind of.
I love that I love and hate him at the same time, because anytime we're ripping on Nuclear Man, we really are ripping on Gene Hackman to a certain extent, too, because he's the voice of this guy.
Right. Oh, God.
So the second battle of Metropolis is where we start wrapping up with the Nuclear Man all of a sudden deciding that he's in love with Lacey. The cheesy villain was the issue versus the content here. Okay, in that battle, why was he spinning the SWAT van? Because he starts spinning the SWAT van with his finger, why does all of a sudden he get playful? And then there's a guy spinning out of the SWAT van into the air. The choices, how can you write that script and you make this guy that's whole purpose is to destroy start playing around with a SWAT van? out of nowhere. Even if you were showing him as childlike, I would get that. That was right before we got the super telekinesis, because he did the same thing, start spinning the people into the air.
If you start to pull on those threads, the whole thing unravels, Sean.
I know.
Why does he have long nails? I don't know.
Wait, and they got longer. I mean, it's like there were women that were jealous watching that going, you mean like this guy doesn't need press-ons? He can just at will make them as long as he wants to?
Do his nails get longer the longer he's exposed, to sunlight? What? I don't know.
No, he chose. He chose to do that.
Popping them out. He could pop claws, like do a wolfy thing.
Sure.
Well, actually, a saber-tooth thing where he can grow them out, and yeah.
The elevator bit I actually liked.
I like it a lot.
I liked that he didn't. I liked that he didn't use the elevator, even though it looked weird. Like when he was flying through the ceilings, it looked a little weird. But I liked the visual of the outside of the building as the windows were gradually breaking. I'm like, why would he take the stairs? Why would he take an elevator or anything like that? It makes sense that the villain's just going to be like, I'm destroying everything anyway. I just want to get to the girl. So I thought that choice was really well done. Yeah. And then Superman, to me, I love this because it harkened back to the first movie. Lex teased Superman into opening up the box.
Yeah.
Superman teased Nuclear Man into going in the elevator with the same trick. I thought that was brilliant.
I know. I think that whole, again, I like the sun being the weakness, and I liked how it played off. And again, Clark's able to figure it out because Clark can keep up with Superman. I mean, Clark can keep up with Lex. Clark can keep up with Lex. And so I like the fact that he's able to figure out that sunlight's the power. And the one scene throughout this that I actually was very happy they did was when he pulls the elevator out and he takes it to the dark side of the moon. They didn't go, because everyone thinks, the dark side of the moon doesn't get any sunlight. No, it actually does get sunlight. It doesn't get the Earth shine because it never faces the Earth, but it does get it will get direct sunlight. So I like the fact that even putting it on the dark side of the moon, it still was able to get the sunlight into, and all it took was just one little crack in the elevator, and that was able to recharge the dude.
Well, there's something that happens here, not to raise the specter of Man of Steel, but repeatedly in these Christopher Reeve movies, there's this focus on Superman, at some point stops and goes, okay, we have to take this battle out of here. We have to take this elsewhere because this is way too dangerous. And I love this thing with the elevator. He tricks him into going in there and then immediately takes advantage of that and grabs him and is out of there. Let's go to the moon, okay? Let's go duke this out up there.
Now, of course, and I agree with you. I love that, how he took it there. There's no one around to get hurt. But again, just me looking at the laws of physics that, just don't apply. There was tons of them in this outer space fight sequence. Capes fluttering in space, which doesn't happen. When Nuclear Man picks up that rock to throw it at Clark, all that moon dust falls down on top of him. No gravity. Dust doesn't fall down like that.
Well, there's a little gravity, but not it's. I really don't like that they almost the entire sequence now they do in slow motion.
Yeah,
it's grueling, kind of. I think it's a mistake.
What did you guys think of Nuclear Man pounding Superman into the ground?
Well, why didn't he go for the death blow again? Why did he just beat him into the ground? Why did he pop claws and scratch him again in the neck?
Hubris? I don't know.
Why did Superman protect the flag before going back to saving anybody? Did you see that part where he raised the flag up and then he went to go save people?
Because he's Superman. He's stop and go, wait, flag's up. Okay, good.
Yeah. This is funny.
Now, of course, we get to the Great Lacey in space.
We got to work on your definition of great.
Now, does Nuclear Man have a force field? Because that's the only way I can think of her surviving as he's flying her out into outer space. Yes. That was the only thing that popped in my head.
Yes, of course he does. Clearly he has a force field.
Well, Superman must have the same one because he flies an awful long way to get her back to Earth.
Yeah.
Well, if you go by the John Byrne thing, that he has this really really thin force field around him. Maybe he can expand that. I don't know.
That's a good point. I had a real problem with that sequence. The best part, and I didn't care if it was right, wrong, science of it, when he threw him into that substation and like he's lighting the whole city, and you just get this idea, okay, Nuclear Man is being dispersed all over the place. And just as long as that energy is completely used up, so there can be no Nuclear Man round 2, or round 3, or round 4, whatever you want to call it, I'm the happiest camper in the world.
The end.
Well, yeah. One more thing before that.
Okay.
With Clark blocking the sun with the moon. Mm-hmm. Now, we all know what an eclipse is and all that, but eclipses work because of line of sight blockage. Mm-hmm. The moon isn't actually big enough to block the sun. It's only able to block one portion of the Earth that's reflecting. So when Nuclear Man and Lacey were in outer space, there's no way Clark could have positioned the moon to block the sunlight hitting Nuclear Man.
Hitting Nuclear Man and the Earth at the same time? You mean?
Right. He couldn't do it. So,
I mean, he killed Nuclear Man with it. I'm okay.
Right. So we'll let that go.
So we let it go.
Yeah, I don't really have an argument for you on that one, other than the fact that I believe it because it killed Nuclear Man.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's why I said there comes a point where science no longer matters. It just worked. Just at that point, like I'm looking, this is like about 121 into the film.
Yeah.
And you know what? I was pretty okay with anything that was going to get rid of Nuclear Man at this point.
Yeah.
I mentioned Wacky Races earlier. If they had a couple of those villains come out and somehow they took down Nuclear Man with their cars in space, shouldn't happen. They're cartoon characters. I would have been fine with it as long as they got back to the point where now we're in the last like 5-6 minutes of the film is completely Nuclear Man free.
See, now I want to see a scene with those bad guys, acting, like the Keystone Cops, and play the Benny Hill music and watch them defeat Nuclear Man.
That would have been a better fight sequence.
I think so. And they're able to defeat Nuclear Man, because of their crazy antics that don't make sense, and he, just gets really flustered. And
it's funny part, Jim, I'm like nodding when you're sitting there going with the whole eclipse thing. I'm like, you know what? I don't know enough about that science to just argue with you. I don't really care other than like I'm willing to. They could have put a toothpick in front of the sun and said it blocked it out.
And then the shadow is cast on Nuclear Man.
It did. It was just enough. That sliver was enough to block the sunlight that was hitting Nuclear Man. Just long enough for Superman to be able to take him and throw him into that nuclear silo and light the city up. That would have been fine with me. I wouldn't have cared. Or he super kicked him through Pluto or something. I don't know. Whatever. It didn't matter. Just as long as it happened. I liked Perry White coming back and reclaiming the Daily Planet as the lead shareholder. It was kind of cool because I always liked Perry White. I liked this portrayal of Perry White. You need to see the chief at the end have a moment. I was always glad that they gave him one because I thought the Daily Planet casting was always really strong. I love Jimmy Olsen. I love Lois Lane. I love Perry White. It's a great bullpen that they've got there. And I think that's really critical in the Superman universe. So I think you need to, when you've got great actors that are like fitting those parts, give them those moments so that way they feel like, wow, it was worth it for me to do, which basically a cameo in these films, because Perry did not have a lot of big character arc moments. And to give him that moment, I geeked out. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it's nice to have him back.
Yes.
I also liked when Superman went and caught Lex and Lenny. It was great to see him lift up the car, kind of a closure to that sequence of events. And separating Lex from Lenny, I thought was also a strength.
Interesting choice that Superman made there, and we all applaud.
Yes.
That choice. Yes, get Lenny out of there.
And then the ending at the end with Superman flying, doing the kind of loop around.
And waving.
Yeah.
And smiling at the camera and then flying off.
Yeah.
Thing.
That
I think every Superman movie has to end that way or I'm not happy.
Yeah, exactly. I really think that's a really important part of what makes these movies work.
Yeah. It's like at the end there, it's Superman saying, hey guys, thanks for watching. Everything out okay? I'll see you next time. I like it. It's actually one of my favorite things about these movies.
So here's the ultimate question, and I think it's almost something we have to ask with each one of these. Would you watch this again?
Yeah, I think I would. I haven't watched this with my kids. I wonder what my kids would think of it.
Yeah.
I just watched it while I was working the most recent time. I don't think my kids have seen Superman 3 either, really. Because I'm just kind of embarrassed by it, So, Superman 3 and 4, they're kind of embarrassing movies as a fan because of their goofiness. But at the same time, especially from the perspective of a kid, kids don't see that stuff the same way. So I would watch it again with my kids.
It runs into the cycle for me where I liked it enough. I liked enough of the content, I should say, because there's things that this one, really comparative to 1 and 2 are in a category of their own. Mm-hmm. 3 has a distance from those. 4, has a planet away from those. But if I started watching 1 and 2, there's enough continuity in 4 that I would watch 3 and 4. 3 because I think there's a lot of great content in 3. Mm-hmm. 4 has some great sequences that are horribly ruined by Nuclear Man. That I would watch 4 again, but it would have to be the other 3 would lead me into 4.
You know what I want to see? I want to see somebody do a fan edit of this movie and just remove all the dumb stuff. Remove Nuclear Man completely, even though it would make a bunch of other things not make sense. But at least you wouldn't have Nuclear Man in there. Just remove him and just have the movie kind of end with no battle.
When the fast forward button isn't enough.
Right. Not enough. Take him out completely and just have a Nuclear Man free movie.
Yeah, because with the fast forward button, you still have to see that he was there.
Yeah. You're just reminded. It's kind of cruel, really.
Yeah, and you're right. I'd kind of like to see it because I like 3, so I wouldn't want to watch 3 without the pieces that they put into that different version of 4.
Right.
Yeah, so you're right. Just the Nuclear Man bits would be really great to take out of there.
I wonder if you could insert something else back in there. I don't know what.
Like Anchorman or
Yeah, man. Just put anything there. No, you know what you do? You drop in scenes, from a Godzilla movie, of the monsters, just fighting.
Right. I would put a little television around it. I'd put a little television around it, and we could pretend. What you do is you initiate each of those sequences with Superman was sick. Right. So you show the sickly Superman watching that. And we're just hanging with Superman watching what he's watching during that time.
Or maybe you just act like it's the battles are like a fever dream that he's having.
Yeah.
Godzilla or something, I don't know.
Holy coal in a donut!
I really want to give a quick shout out to our Facebook group. It's a wonderful community of people. We share it with DCinfinite.com. If you go to Facebook and you search for Raging Bullets, you'll actually see a Raging Bullets regular Facebook page, but you'll also see a Raging Bullets, a DC Fan Podcast Facebook group. And I encourage you to go and join it. It's a great community. They talk, obviously, a lot of DC Comics, a lot of DC Comics related media, games, things like that as well. But they also talk about pop culture in general. Marvel's discussed, independent comics are discussed, television show, films, anything out there that people want to discuss. People shout out their blogs and podcasts. It's a great community, a lively community of people. So please consider joining and being a part of the group. It's friendly, it's fun. We're there to talk about and geek out about the things that we really enjoy. So please be a part of that community. I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. I intended to have voicemails on this episode. They're actually, in order to get this episode out now, they're going to wait till the next one, but I will get all caught up on any voicemails that we have. We have a wonderful voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. It's always available in the show notes and on our websites. Please consider calling into the show because we love having you a part of it. I want to hear your thoughts, but listener voicemails will for sure be on next episode. And we are available, as I mentioned, on Facebook. We have a website, ragingbullets.com, where I put news and updates on where the show is headed. That feeds our Twitter feed. That also feeds our Facebook page. So if you like following Twitter or Facebook, you can follow both of those. You can also find us on Google+. I have a personal Facebook page, as does Jim. I also have a personal Google Plus page, and please feel free to add us on any of those. I tend to post more from my personal Facebook account, including to the Raging Bullets group. So if you want to add me on there and have direct communication with me, I would love to have you on my friends list. So thank you for everybody who participates in social media. And also, I want to take a couple seconds really quick to just thank anybody throughout 400 episodes who has shouted out the show. Whether you just told one person or you told larger groups of people about it in forums and all that. We don't have like an advertising budget. We're lucky enough to have a show sponsor that we I'll talk about in a little bit. They help us break even on our costs, really, on doing the podcast. So we rely heavily on our listeners to shout us out. And this isn't true of us. It's true of most podcasts. We really need you guys to just get the word out if you're enjoying what we do. So thank you. There's a lot of people who don't have a chance to say thank you to and retweet or, message on Facebook or things when they shout us out. I don't always get a chance to see when people do that. And I know a lot of you do things behind the scenes to various websites letting people know, or even in your comic shop if you let them know about our podcast, which we really appreciate as well. It's greatly appreciated. I try to respond to tweets and Facebook messages and emails that I receive. I'm not always able to. Life gets in the way. So if you ever messaged me and I missed it, I apologize. Please feel free to message me again. It's not that I'm ignoring you. It's sometimes I genuinely miss those messages or emails because of the amount that I get. So please feel free to add them again. But I do want to say a quick one more time thank you to everybody out there who has in some way either joined us on the podcast, shouted out our podcast, said hello at a convention. We've been very lucky over the years in the 400, it's been over 8 years now, over 400 episodes now. And it's really, you guys keep us coming back. And it's made this a really, really fun ride. So thank you for being a part of that. Speaking of sponsors, I want to personally thank, once again, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. I shout them out on the show because they sponsor our show. I also shout them out on the show, and I'm thrilled to shout them out on the show because I have been a customer of theirs for years. And it's really terrific to be able to shout out two websites that I think do a lot of great things for comics. Their service is excellent. I always get my books and statues and posters and whatever I order from them in pristine condition. They really are a flexible service. If you want your books bagged and boarded, they will do that for you. They're very accommodating to whatever your needs are. You can get your shipping weekly, you can get your shipping bi-weekly, you can get your shipping monthly, depending on how you want to book your budget. If you do digital shopping, you can earn part of that towards your DCB service order, which is really fantastic, to just get a few extra bucks every month, because I do a hybrid shopping where I buy paper books still, but I also buy a lot of digital, so it's nice to be able to have that digital go back to them. They've been wonderful, wonderful sites. I've had an opportunity to meet them at multiple conventions in person, and they're wonderful people. So it's nice to be associated with that, and I'm very proud to be associated with that, and I want to thank them for their sponsorship. Jim, can you believe 400 episodes? Pretty nutty. I have to chuckle again at the end of this one that this is the first part of a two-parter that was really going to be a three-parter when we're all done with it at the end of the month. But we have these discussions sometime, and Jim and I almost start laughing partway through it because we'll say things like, oh, we can do each of those movies in an hour. And I don't think either of us believes it when we say it. But yet we seem to think that it makes sense when we're having that conversation. Oh, sure, we can get all that in that time. It's no problem. Forgetting that not only was it you and me, but we also had Art joining us. How is that even going to be possible? But we had this great plan that, we weren't going to go through and talk about every part of the movie. And that, to me, defeats the purpose of what we do. We typically do the cover-to-cover discussions, whether it's a film from start to finish or a book from start to finish. So I found that these were very rewarding conversations to have. I had a blast, but that's one of the things I like about recording with you. It's half the fun is seeing the things that we agree about, the things that we disagree about, and also some of the things that we notice about films that maybe, you'll watch a film a different way than I do, and you catch a theme or a tone in a way that I don't. And it actually, the next time I go through and watch a movie, it changes my experience because I've had that discussion. Same thing with the great opportunity to join Art, because Art also just gets it. He's been with our show for so long that he just is really It's like having, a third host of the show. We've been lucky over the years in the sense that the people that we've had that have come on as guests have all been people that have genuinely wanted to have the kind of discussions that we have on here, so there's a nice flow. And that we've been lucky. That's something there's never been a person on that I felt was awkward on the show, in the sense that we didn't, and I think if somebody comes on our show and it's awkward, that's on us, because our job is to make them feel welcome and a part of the podcast. And we've been lucky that we've just been able to have experiences where we've had a good connection with the people that have been on our show. And Art certainly gave a lot of his time. I mean, this turned out to be, this was 5 hours of Art's night that he gave us. And I really had a great time talking to him. So I'm looking forward to delivering part B.
Yes. Part A, Part B. There's not going to be a Part C, but who knows what'll come down the line.
Well, there will be. It'll be in the 400s. It'll be at the end, towards the end of this month. So we'll have a chance to sit down and talk Catwoman then. Our next episode has actually already been recorded. We talked about the most recent issue of Batgirl. We talked about books such as the Robin Rises, excellent Robin Rises issue that came out. Jim and I recorded a few things ahead of time with the intention of preparing for vacations that were upcoming. So there would be a little gap in content for you guys that you just experienced before 400, but then after that, everything would be coming back out pretty normally. So we will see you then. And then it will follow that with the Batman and Robin episode. So we will see you soon.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.
That was from Eli.
Oh my god. Dude, that is awesome. That was absolutely amazing, outstanding, and...
That was from Eli, and Eli's done something for every one of our anniversaries, and I really appreciate the fact that he's put so much time into this one, because it really made me smile.
That, you know what? That was big toe worthy. That's not only 2 thumbs up, but he gets a big toe as well.
Is that like a punishment, or?
Dude, that's one of the highest forms of compliments I can give to somebody. See, it's not only just 2 thumbs up is not good enough. They need the big toe.
We've used that Hawkman theme at the end for years now because it's made me smile. It's kind of the same reason. I'm like, hey, the closing theme should be something like that. I'm actually going to take this one, and that's going to be our new closing theme. Cool. Seeing as we're at 400 and we're moving forward, I think it's kind of a neat way to do that. And I really appreciate Eli putting that together. He's done this throughout the history of our show, not just for anniversaries. From time to time, he's put together some fun things relating to the show, and they take a lot of work. And that one just it's so fitting to kind of put at the end and kind of moving forward just to have something fun. It's just a transition time. So it's cool.